The purpose of this is for me to introduce myself a little bit to all of you today, and I'm going to do that as quickly as possible, tell you a little something about the incumbent Attorney General, and then we're going to get to the real payoff, which is the questions that you have to ask, because I'm far more interested in the things that are important to you than in sharing with you a lot about me. But in that spirit, I think as you make this decision, you're going to want to know a little bit about me in order to decide and make this very consequential decision about who's going to be your next Attorney General. So I will say that I'm Daniel Crowe, and I am going to be your next Attorney General. And so I grew up on a small farm outside of Mount Angel, between Mount Angel and Jervis, about 15 miles northeast of Salem. Yes, ma'am?
Would you please stop more slowly?
I can absolutely do that. Did my wife plant you there? So I grew up on a small farm outside of Mount Angel, which is about 16 miles northeast of Salem. My parents were truckers, and the two things that taught me from my childhood were that I didn't want to be a small farmer and I didn't want to be a trucker. Way too hard. So I followed a different path, and that carried me through West Point, through Army Ranger School, into service as a combat arms officer, and then that carried me into my first year in law school. And when I was in my first year in law school, at the behest of the Army, I learned truly what it was that I was fighting for. And that was because my daughter Anna was born on the 15th of April of 1996. And Anna had some problems, and those problems resulted in her not saying her first word until she was 3 years, not getting into a wheelchair until she was 5, and not getting out of a wheelchair until she was 11. And the two things that Anna taught me, and her brother Thomas, were first of all how lucky I was to be their dad, and second of all, the irreplaceable value of determination, of tenacity. And I'm proud to say that Anna continued showing that example all the way through this coming January, when she's going to be graduating from John F. Kennedy High School, her daddy's alma mater. And that showed me something. And at the same time, when that happened in my first year in law school, it set the path to empower me to the type of law that I was ultimately destined to practice. So I was lucky enough, as a judge advocate for the last 2/3 of my Army career, a military lawyer, I had the opportunity to defend service members who were accused of crimes and make sure that the government followed its own rules. I had the opportunity to stand up for victims as a prosecutor and as a district attorney. I had the opportunity to serve as a legal aid attorney and then as a senior staff attorney at U.S. European Command for the last 7 years of my time as an officer, and ensuring that at the highest level, our interests in the United States and the interests of the United States were protected. And specifically, what I was responsible for was delivering nonpartisan, non-political, legal services for the benefit of our country. And that's exactly what I'm going to bring to the Oregon Department of Justice. Because in the Oregon Department of Justice, we have to make a decision, and this election is a referendum on that decision. Do we want an Attorney General whose loyalty lies to her party and to their patrons, or do we want an Attorney General who is going to have their loyalty be to the law and to the source of the law, which is the people? And that's the decision that we have to make. Now let me share a little bit about the incumbent Attorney General and why she's unfit for the task. The three things that the Attorney General is responsible for on a day-to-day basis that touch each and every one of our lives are investigating and, when necessary, prosecuting public corruption, carefully reviewing every one of Oregon's contracts to make sure that we're getting our money's worth, and being the honest broker in the ballot titling process to deliver that 15-word ballot title, the 25-word result of yes vote, the 25-word result of no vote, and the 125-word summary that, taken together, allow you and allow every Oregon voter in their voter's pamphlet to know what in the heck we're voting on when it comes time to cast our ballot and let our voices be heard. The incumbent Attorney General has failed on all three of these counts during her tenure. Now, when we talk about corruption, we have to remember that this is an Attorney General who was appointed to this position on the 29th of June of 2012 by Governor John Kitzhaber. And she returned the favor for that appointment by turning a blind eye to Governor Kitzhaber's offenses. 548 odd days later, we still don't have any answers. We don't even have any questions. And therefore, we have no closure in Oregon government. Corruption, starting at the top, results in lack of accountability all the way down through our government. And that's what we're laboring under right now, is a political class that doesn't feel like it has to answer for its actions, its choices, its malfeasance, its incompetence, and its corruption. And that's what Oregon is laboring under right now, and that's what we're trying to address. With respect to carefully reviewing Oregon's contracts and agreements to make sure that we're getting a good deal, well, any lawyer that you hired that lost $300 million of your money, well, she'd lose her job. She should lose her job. $300 million, even government notices when $300 million disappears. Add to that 200, and that was the Cover Oregon scandal, by the way, for those of you who haven't been reading the papers for the last 4 years. Another $200 million walks out the back door, not building a bridge across the Columbia River at I-5. And Sal told me something today that I wasn't even aware of, and that is we don't even have any plans for a bridge after $200 million spent. That's $500 million of your tax money disappeared out the back door. And when $500 million disappears, kids don't stop needing to get educated. Foster kids don't stop needing to get taken care of. Now, when we start running out of money, corners get cut, absolutely. So we see foster kids being subjected to physical and sexual violence over the last 20 years, the Attorney General doing nothing about it because they're cutting corners. But more importantly, this Attorney General is the godmother of the sales tax. Because if she hadn't blown a $500 million hole in our budget, we wouldn't be needing so desperately to fill that hole up. The last thing that the Attorney General is responsible for is being an honest broker in the ballot titling process. People often forget that the Oregon plan, the initiative, the recall, and the referendum was invented by William Simon U'Ren, a Clackamas County Republican back at the turn of the century. And the reason it was invented was to serve as a bulwark against machine politics. It was invented in order to make professional politicians accountable to the people. But in order for that system to work properly, the Attorney General has to do her job, or his job, in honestly titling Oregon's ballot initiatives. And so I'm going to see if I have it handy, because we were just talking about it at dinner. So this is Ellen Rosenblum's, if I can make my phone work, this is Ellen Rosenblum's proposed ballot title for English as an official language. So this was submitted to her. In fact, Sal, I think you wrote this, didn't you? Yeah. So this is her proposed ballot title for English as an official language for Oregon. Changes, state, / quote, subdivision, close quote, parentheses, undefined, close parentheses, laws regarding English / other language use and requirements, semicolon, exceptions, semicolon, authorizes lawsuits. That was her proposed ballot title. I'll show it to you later because I know that's difficult to follow. Here is my proposed ballot title. Should English be declared as the official language of Oregon? Here is the problem. When you have an officer of government, particularly a lawyer, particularly the Attorney General, who places her thumb on the scales of justice, justice becomes impossible. Because what's the scale measuring at that point? When we have somebody whose primary loyalty is to her political party and not to the law, not to the people, not to the truth, then you end up with the system breaking down. The entire integrity of the system relies on the Attorney General not being loyal to her party. Because justice is not a question of left or right. It's a question of right or wrong. Right now, we have two options, and this election is a referendum on which of those two options we as a people are going to choose. We are either going to choose to honor and respect the rule of law, or we are going to choose arbitrary rule. There are only two possibilities. The Attorney General is supposed to be the custodian of the machinery of the law. And to be the custodian of the machinery of law requires absolute integrity. And I'm sad to say that this Attorney General lacks the integrity which would justify us giving her this position of public trust. So this is an election in which we have to make a decision about whether or not we're going to enforce the rule of law. So that's why I'm here. That's what she's done wrong. And let me share with you just very quickly how I'm going to begin addressing some of these issues. Day one, I'm going to form the Office of Regulatory Review in the Oregon Department of Justice. That office is going to be oriented towards providing Oregonians someplace where they can go when they're confronted with a regulation that is unlawful or inconsistent with another regulation or just plain dumb. Because right now in Oregon government, we don't have anybody who's enforcing honesty in that process. I'm going to work with the legislature to try to make the Office of Attorney General a nonpartisan position because I don't believe that it should be involved with partisan politics. I'm going to work with the legislature in order to address our most critical, what I believe is our most critical public safety threat, and that is the danger of untreated mental illness in our society. Guns are not the problem. We do not face a guns crisis. What we face is a mental health crisis, an untreated mental health crisis. We also aren't doing enough to address addiction. There are many areas in which I can work with my partners in the legislature in order to deliver solutions to Oregon. But, as I shared with you at the very beginning, I'm far more interested in the solutions that you guys are interested in. And so, please, this is an opportunity that I'm not going to get very often because I don't get a chance to come down to Medford as much as I'd like. And I'd love to entertain any questions that anybody has. Ma'am.
Recently, Rosenblum refused to defend the Oregon constitutional amendment that mandated marriage be between a man and a woman, a man and a woman. She refused to defend it, so now we have same-sex marriage. Can that be turned around?
Not unless we change the composition of the U.S. Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court has, since Judge McShane ruled on that, the Supreme Court has come down and said, we find this right to exist in the U.S. Constitution. So now the federal courts, like many issues which Oregon is perfectly capable of managing on our own. We can manage the practice of medicine on our own. We can manage the delivery and control of drugs on our own. We can also manage the definition of marriage on our own. The problem with what Ellen Rosenblum did was that she did the one thing that a lawyer can never do. If she thought that gay marriage and Measure 36, which was at issue here, if she thought that that was a violation of the U.S. Constitution, she could have gone to the plaintiffs and she could have signed an agreement right on the spot, what we call a consent decree, and that would have settled it. That would have been it. That's the power of the Attorney General of Oregon. But instead, she did the one thing that an attorney can never do. She threw a case. She went forward in federal litigation, and she did not defend her client, and yet she didn't settle. We ask attorneys in Oregon every day to take on tough cases, cases in which they're defending people who have committed murder, who've committed bank robbery, who've committed, alleged to commit sexual molestation. The example that she set is you get to pick, based on your personal feelings, whether or not you defend your client zealously. That is unacceptable, that is un-American, and that is inconsistent with her oath. And that's the thing that you can't do, and that's the problem that I have with her, with throwing that case. It's the absolute, I mean, she should be disbarred for it, to be honest. And it's not because of gay marriage. Gay marriage is settled. The Supreme Court has spoken. It's the law of the land. There's nothing, absent changing the composition of the Supreme Court or amending the Constitution, the United States Constitution, there's nothing that we can do about it now. But that has a little something to do with whether or not we should be voting for that guy in the fall, is a composition of the Supreme Court that actually isn't going to railroad and destroy our rights such as they are anymore. Thank you. Any other questions? Sir?
Yeah, to educate some of us who haven't been paying attention for so long, on your website you gave a list of governors that we thought were pretty good and pretty bad.
Yep.
And one of the, you included in the good ones, Kulingoski, and showed a bad one is Kitzhaber. Now, they're both Democrats.
Yep.
So could you give us some of your thoughts as to how you made that distinction?
Sure. First of all, I want to clarify, I graded that on a scale. That was graded on a curve there. So here's the difference. To my knowledge, Ted Kulingoski never stole money from the people. Ted Kulingoski never violated Oregon ethics laws. Ted Kulingoski never suborned an attorney general to be complicit in committing crimes against the state of Oregon. So in terms of voting, now I know that Governor Kitzhaber has a lot of followers. And by the way, I need to get Democratic votes as well as Republican votes and non-affiliated voter votes to win. And so I don't. My mom was a Democrat from June of 1961 until this fall, or until actually this spring when she transferred over for her son, finally. But the thing is, I don't have a problem with Democrats as Democrats. There's a lot of good Democrats, and Sal can list a lot more of them than I can. They're not the problem. There is a cabal of Portland Democrats led by Tina Kotek, Kate Brown, Ellen Rosenblum. They all came up in the same fishbowl, and their familiarity with Oregon is the I-5 corridor from the Washington border down to Salem. That's maybe Eugene on a good day. And so you know, as long as Ted didn't commit any crimes, I can live with him as a governor. And plus the fact, I mean, he's a Marine, and even I don't even hold that against him. So if I can forgive him for being a Marine, I can forgive him for being a Democrat as well. Sir.
You talked about the votes that you need.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think the election will go? What's your prognosis? And then finally, what can we do to help you?
I'm glad I planted that question with you. Bud Pierce right now is 1.7 points down. He's within the margin of error with Kate Brown. And Dennis is ahead. And Jeff is doing very well, Jeff Goodman, the candidate for treasurer. Right? This year, all of our candidates have been very disciplined because, as we all know, the margin for error for Republican running in any office, whether it's nationally or statewide, there is no margin for error. The media is going to jump on any misstatement that we make, but if we said that there were 57 states, that would be forgiven, right? Because we would be the chosen one. The issue on how to win is making sure that you are appealing to the honesty, the essential honesty of every Oregon voter. Right? Democrats don't want cronyism. Democrats are sick of cronyism. And the answer to the question, why Bernie, is exactly the same answer as the question, why Trump? Right? Democrats and Republicans from both sides of the political spectrum are sick and tired of cronyism and corruption and theft and lying and using public office for personal gain. Those are the things. So our mission is to contrast our principles and our philosophy with Ellen. The way that you guys can all help, first of all, is just by coming here tonight. And then you are all, particularly those of you who are PCPs, are respected in your community, and people look to you for opinions as to how they should vote. Right? So getting out there and sharing the word with people and communicating that this election is an opportunity for everybody to get out and cast their vote or stay in and cast their vote. This is an opportunity. As we all know, there have been multiple elections in the last several cycles in which Republicans could have won if Republicans had turned out. Right? The Democrats aren't popular. But to understand why we have been losing for the last 25 years, we've got to take a good, strong look in the mirror and say, have our priorities been the same as the priorities of the people? Because we as a party never compromise on our principles. But we may need to compromise on our priorities in order to get the things done that the Oregon people want. And more importantly, at least with respect to the Attorney General, nobody ever came to a lawyer to tell them what their priorities are. You go to a lawyer to ethically, conscientiously, and effectively discharge your priorities. So the first step is just coming in here and engaging tonight and listening to what I have to say with an open mind. The second step is going out and communicating that message. The third step is going right back there to the table at the back. We've got some signs, we've got some contribution envelopes, and just in case any of you haven't been told, for those of you filing jointly, the first $100 that you make as a political contribution, you get to take as an Oregon tax credit. Just saying. If you file singly, you can take $50 off. You've probably given all that money to Sal already, but there are no maximum limits in Oregon. So just in case any of you won the lottery today, you know where to share some of that newfound wealth with. But the issue is just being true to our principles and not being, I think where we have shot ourselves in the foot in the past is we have been more interested in purity as Republicans than we have been in effectiveness and in winning. As Ronald Reagan used to say, I can't do anything for you if I don't get elected. And so that's, to me, the first struggle. And my wife and I had a good argument about that on the way up, because her philosophy is always, well, then you'd be no better than they are. And I said, why did you ever think that I wanted to be better than them? Right? I want to win. I want to win because I believe that the rule of law needs a champion. And that's what we're struggling with right now. And that's where I'm coming from. So if losing gracefully, if I have to choose between losing gracefully and winning ugly, that's an easy choice, because in combat, second place means you're dead, right? So that's what, to me, that's the stakes of this election. Does anybody else have any questions? Sir?
Does the Attorney General have any role in structuring PERS?
Kind of. So that's a good lawyerly answer. Well, yes and no. I'm glad you asked, because the one thing that people often don't realize when I go out there and talk in the community is all of these disasters that the Oregon government has overlooked, and literally overlooked, over the last 25 years since we've been laboring under one-party rule. All of them can be traced back to the Attorney General, because every lawyer who works in Oregon government answers to the Attorney General. So the way that we do this is that all the lawyers answer to the Attorney General, and then I parse them out amongst all the departments of Oregon government. So I have lawyers who work for the Secretary of State, I have lawyers who work for the governor, I have lawyers who work for all the different departments, Oregon State Police, whatnot. The ability, so these lawyers over the last 25 years, and particularly over the last 8 years, have been providing the fig leaves of legitimacy that have allowed the Democrats to break the law. Right? So, absent control of the office of the Attorney General, the Democrats' ability to rule undemocratically goes down by about 95%. So the issue with respect to PERS is the same issue that you brought up earlier, and it is that this Attorney General has a habit of throwing cases and of not advancing the best arguments. That's what happened in the PERS litigation in front of the Supreme Court, is we lost, and we weren't able to modify the things that needed to be modified in PERS, which has blown this big hole in the budget. When I look over that case, I see a lot of arguments that should have been made that weren't made. And so the issue with respect to addressing PERS in the long term is going to require, probably it's going to require a constitutional amendment. But the good news is the people are perfectly capable of amending the Constitution to let their voices be heard. So the solution is going to be about making sure that none of the other solutions, particularly the illegal ones, are allowed to be exercised. So as Attorney General, when, let's say for instance, if the legislature, if we don't have a majority, and the legislature decides that they're going to zero out funding for education in order to pay for the funding for PERS or for any other programs, which is what they've been doing over the last couple of cycles, is underspending on critical public priorities. I mean, what do they do in New York when we have a snowstorm? They zero out payment. If they haven't got the tax increases that they want, they stop paying for snowplows. Right? That's an old Democratic Party trick. Right? So they're going to cut the things that hurt us most. Well, as the Attorney General, I may be in the position, I think I would be in the position to say it is a constitutional requirement that you fund education, cut something else, cut the Oregon Department of Commerce. Right? The Oregon Department of Commerce never gets cut. Right? That's the last thing in the world that gets cut. Cut employee salaries, cut something else, legislature. But if you have an Attorney General who is rendering an opinion under the law that constrains them, then the legislature, particularly the Democrats in the legislature, will have to reach across the aisle with their Republican colleagues and find some real solutions that everyone can live with. So basically, my role in addressing the PERS crisis is making sure that they don't get to take a shortcut. Because in the law particularly, the ends should never justify the means. Because there's no end to that. There's no stop to that. We don't have a rule of law anymore. Does anybody else have any questions? Well, thank you so much. I will stay here and answer questions until you guys get tired, but it looks like you got tired. So thank you so much for having me today, and I appreciate so much your support. Please feel free to grab any of those contribution envelopes or any of my palm cards when I'm going out. And if you have any questions afterwards that you'd like to ask me one-on-one, then please do. Thanks so much.